Hi, I'm Brett Sankis, a business attorney and consultant, and today we're talking about a major social problem, the widening income gap. Now, if you've followed any of my other videos, seen any of them, you know I love business and I love law and I love capitalism and I studied economics in undergrad and I'm very free market oriented. Although I recognize that there are some limits or some negative aspects of capitalism. That's what I want to talk about today because it's a problem for all of us. It's a problem for business and society generally. The problem is the widening income gap. It's the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Those who are making and have a lot of money and those who do not. So the issue has been generally framed in this country as the 99% and the 1%. You may remember a number of years back the Occupy Wall Street movement. That was the 99% have-nots and the 1% haves. It's actually worse than that. So it's really the 0.1% and the 99.9%. I mean, there is a kind of middle sort of upper middle kind of group that's kind of holding their own and doing okay. But the real disparity here, the real change in the world is among those who really have a lot and those who really don't have much at all. And it's increasing at a really astronomical and frightening rate. So at the time I'm doing this video, the 0.1%, so it's 1/10 of 1% of American, the US society, holds as much wealth as the bottom 90%. They've increased from 7% of the wealth, this is the 0.1%, to 22% of the wealth in the past 10 or 15 years. So you've got this huge, like the top is taking a lot relatively compared to the bottom. It's just moving up. And the problem with that is that that's not sustainable, okay? It won't continue forever. The deal, right, the economic deal, what we all agree to in society can be revisited. It has been revisited in history many times. If you look back at history, like there's times when the have-nots or the also-rans or those who don't have all the power sort of revisit it. The concern would be that they're going to revisit it in some way that's sort of a revolution of some sort. So I'm not talking like, I'm more, I think, far away from bloodshed in the streets and outright sort of social upheaval. But if this continues unabated, it will end there if it doesn't sort of resolve itself. Let's just look at why this is, right? It's clear it is. I mean, you just cannot argue that the gap is widening and the difference between the haves and have-nots is getting broader. So one is economic. And one is very simply, you can understand it by just the power of having the wealth. And that's rooted in compounding interest is one. So a lot of America is on credit cards. They're paying back student loans. They've got debt. They're paying interest. That interest is preventing them from accumulating savings and growing. And so they're on kind of that side of the curve where they're just feeding interest. Who are they feeding it to? Well, the haves, right? So over here you have a big pile of money and you're taking the interest in. So even if they're equally productive, this one's losing, right? The have-nots are losing economic value and the haves are gaining it simply by having what they have. So I view this all. I mean, capitalism, and one of its real challenges, it's like a game of Monopoly. And what happens in the end in Monopoly is that one person has all the wealth. And they have it, if you've ever played Monopoly, because eventually it gets really hard when you don't have anything and you're passing Boardwalk and there's 2 hotels on it or one, I don't know, I can't remember the game, what you can do. But the problem is, like, you can't survive if you're not competing, if you're not one of the haves. So that's one, that's economic, and it's very simply that. The other is political, and there's a lot here. And the problem, unlike Monopoly, where the rules are fixed throughout, in the real world, in US society and every country, the rules are changed, and they're changed by those who have the power. And so the haves are constantly changing laws to protect their interests and increase their wealth. I don't think I'm saying anything any of you don't know, but it's really stark the way it's happening and what's being created here and the problem we're up against. And so one of the ways they do that with taxation. There's been recent tax cuts. Those tax cuts, I don't care how you frame it, are intended to really benefit the wealthy. They just will. And that's the outcome of that. They're not going to flow down equally to the have-nots. The structure of taxation in this country, fundamentally, the way we tax ordinary income, the rates of taxation on ordinary income compared to capital gains favor the wealthy. They favor people who make their money not by salary, not by working for someone, by investments. And there's a reason for that. I mean, it's not all nefarious. You want to encourage in a society investment, but the reality is, when the smoke clears, the taxation rate of Warren Buffett, he famously said he pays less tax as a percentage than his secretary. That's true, okay? That may seem nuts to you, given he's, I don't know, today one of the top 3 or 4 most wealthy people in the world, but it has to do with our taxation structure. You want to find something super interesting? Go search for the carried interest loophole. There are, I forget the number, a couple hundred billionaires in this country who are getting some astronomical yearly savings from the way we allow hedge fund managers and private equity fund managers to be taxed on their income. And something that looks a lot like ordinary income that should be taxed at 30-40% is taxed at capital gains rates because of the structure, because of this loophole. There's other things that have gone on, the financial deregulation, the what's happened to unions. I'm not a big union guy, but I think they kind of have sort of outlived their purpose. But the reality is there's no question that taking away a lot of their strength has hurt some of the have-nots at the expense of the haves. And so it's constantly shifting sand. So you've got the economic issue and you've got the political issue. And overall, again, it doesn't really matter why. The fact is, it's a huge, crazy gap. So those who defend the widening gap universally, or almost always, do so by saying that's the free market, that's the way it works. And that's true. That is the rule of the game. I mean, maybe not the political changing and the interests of corporations and the lobbyists to change the rules. Maybe that's not part of the game, but certainly the ability to collect all that interest versus pay it is part of the game. But philosophically, I think in my 20-year-old I study economics, I was very much libertarian and interested in free markets, would be just shocked at how I look at this today. But the reality is that our markets are increasingly less free. And they're less free because of those political reasons that I talked about. This video is about that problem, and I hate to set up a problem without talking a little bit about a solution. I don't think it needs to be blood in the street. One of the things I see as a huge opportunity to sort of reset the system is decentralization. And I have other videos you can check out about the shift of power away from some of traditional wealth towards new wealth, cryptocurrencies, and decentralization. I think those are really powerful movements to reset something that needs to be reset and rebalanced. So I'm interested if you agree with me, if you think I'm crazy, you think I'm a socialist or an anarchist. I just want to hear what you think. So I hope it's reasoned, right? But I'm willing to hear whatever you have to say. So reach out to me and contribute to the conversation. Thank you.